with Gamer Leaf, the podcast in which one man strives to level up his geekhood and helping you do the same, one battle at a time. Now, let's get geeky with Gamer Leaf.
It's a normal day. A young man out jogging gets hit by a truck. But this time, the truck comes off badly. He stands in the middle of the street, shaking slightly, and an undeniable dent in the truck confirms his greatest fear. It did hit him. In the dead of night, a young woman fleeing a gang in one of the nastier parts of the city pants to herself, "I knew not to come here. I knew not to come here." She turns a corner and meets a dead end. Seconds behind, the gang round the corner and react in surprise. She's vanished. Floating upward, she looks down, stifling a cry of amazement. These stories have become almost common during the last year. People have been developing superhuman powers in this otherwise normal, modern world of terror. Quick to respond, the news agencies around the world have publicised many of their stories, fixing on the term empowered to refer to these individuals. Initially met with scepticism, increasing numbers of eyewitnesses and even displays in the streets have led to some of these individuals being lauded as heroes. Naturally, it did not take long for people's fears to overcome their wonder, especially when the first empowered criminals emerged. The power to lay waste to an entire street, to walk through the walls of a bank vault, or to control people's minds are bad enough in theory, without people with the abilities in question roaming the streets willing to use them. Almost as if it was a natural, predestined reaction, some empowered began assisting law enforcement to stop the criminals which so outmatched any normal human. Most of the political powers fight this, demanding the arrest of any individual who takes the law into their own hands. Law enforcement agencies themselves, however, are divided on the issue. The majority of them do not want to face someone who can throw lightning bolts or fireballs, and will happily support individual empowered who are helping them. This has led to tacit agreements in some cities, while others actively hunt anyone who breaks the law, including masked vigilantes. A group which refer to themselves simply as Aegis has formed, led by the charismatic Martian Pantsman. They welcome any empowered into their group who seek protection and a place to live, in the hope that this will reduce the number turning to crime to survive. They allow individuals to come and go as they please from their shared and secret underground lair, which is kept undetectable by one of the most powerful of their number. They are not alone. Other sanctuaries aimed at empowered have sprung up around the world. Many members of Aegis choose to fight criminals in the local area despite the risks involved, while others choose to simply take refuge after being rejected by their families or community, simply for having their abilities. Of course, the precision and coordination of the criminals' attacks imply a similar level of organisation. Who is recruiting and guiding these individuals? What's their ultimate goal? All of this remains a mystery for now. As an empowered, you are often left with one important choice. Do you support the forces of order or embrace the chaos which the criminals offer?
Did that sound familiar to you guys? It didn't to me neither, but this is the story of Air the Empowered, a superpowered RPG by Shades of Vengeance and by Ed Jowett, who is once again joining us on Getting Geeky with Game Relief. And you're the mastermind and creator behind this, Ed, is that correct?
I am the main creator behind this. I had a little help on the creation side. In fact, now's as good a time as any to mention my fantastic team. In particular, Jonathan Lewis. He is a 15-year veteran of writing comics. I'm not allowed to talk about the specifics due to NDAs, but he has definitely written for characters which you have heard of. You may even have read some of his comics. He contributed very much to the timeline I read you the first entry in the timeline there. There are actually 7 separate major events within this timeline that let you play any subgenre of superhero story. So, if, for example, you want to do the emergent stuff, which I just read to you, you can play at the start of the timeline. If you want to do something that's a bit more, perhaps combat-related, there's Atlantis invading. That comes next in the timeline. After that, there's sort of a formation of teams like the Justice League or the Avengers, where they're kind of being much more focused on the larger threats. Then the old gods of myth actually return to the world and seize control of it. And the empowered then have to stand together and fight back. And so on and so on and so on. There are several more events as well. And each of those events offers a sort of a different play style, a different subgenre, as I said, of superhero story. And the idea of this game is that you can literally play any one of those.
Yeah, it sounds like you can be any kind of superhero. That's awesome. Now, before we get too far into it, just to rewind a little bit, we don't have to go all the way back. And of course, unless you were born into RPGs, but for people that may not have heard the first time you were on Getting Geeky with Game Relief, how did you get into role-playing games, Ed?
So I got into role-playing games while I was... Well, I've kind of been into role-playing games all my life. I got properly into tabletop role-playing games at university. I played a bit before, but not very much. And my university indoor gaming society, we ran a 24-hour game every year. And one of the 24-hour games that we ran while I was there was sort of a major sci-fi epic. And it was the tradition that we'd sit down and we'd create our own world for each year. And I was part of a team of 6 GMs who created this sci-fi epic. I created the alien races in particular. I created several specific bits of the history. And that game was kind of the proto-Era the Consortium, my very first game that I created. When I left university, I sort of stopped playing for 2 years. And when I started up again, I had friends and family come along and play. And those guys played through a campaign set in exactly the same universe with some, sort of significant adaptations. 2 years had passed. So, I was changing stuff that I couldn't remember and, fixing stuff so that it worked for the group as the way they were playing it. And this group became Stiletto Unit, who are sort of one of the most central sets of characters of the Era of the Consortium story. Now, when that campaign came to an end, my brother actually asked me to write down the rules so that he could run a game in the same universe. And honestly, since then, I wrote down the rules and then I made it better and better and better, and eventually had a sort of a commercial ready product. I released that and I've not looked back since. I'm now 37 books in.
Wow, 37 books and just all kinds of different adventures. It's from what it seems like.
Yeah, so there's Era the Consortium, which is sci-fi. There's Era Liars, which is low fantasy storytelling. There's Era the Empowered, of course, which is superheroes. There is Era Survival, which is survival horror. There's Era Silence, which is high fantasy with a twist. There is Era Hitman, which is modern with superpowered assassins. There's Era Balam, which is space fighters. And I've got a load more. I've actually got 7 more currently in development.
Oh wow! And they say when you have a child, it's probably better not to pick your favorite. So imagine with this, it's kind of hard. Do you have a favorite?
Era the Consortium by a long way. Don't get me wrong. I love Era the Empowered. I love Era. I love all of the games in their own way. But Era the Consortium, I'm a sci-fi guy, and Era the Consortium, much like I just explained about Era the Empowered, Era the Consortium is every sci-fi game you could ever want to play, all in one game. It's a timeline that I built on my own before I met any of the wonderful people that I'm working with, and we learned so much about how you could make a role-playing game just from the fact that we weren't part of the established industry. None of us were. You know, we went our own way and we did our own thing, and we did it in our own way. And it's got all of the familiar stuff that you would expect from a role-playing game, but the history, this 500 years of history in Era of the Consortium that I mentioned, and also in Era of the Empowered, the 5 years, the 7 events, we present this as a timeline of events, but each timeline entry then has an expansion through a short story, which gives you the emotional context for what's going on. You know, I mean, I might write that the event is, Atlantis surrenders to, the surface world, and agrees to no longer fight. And then there'll be a short story about the event that happened at that time from the perspective of the characters. They're in the UN. The representatives of Atlantis are there, and they're talking, and you'll get to experience what that was actually like, rather than just the flat, okay, this statement about what happened. So rather than writing a sort of a fictional history book, we've found a way to draw the reader in, which is something that I don't see in other role-playing games. And I think that it rather than having to read 150 pages of fictional history, and who wants to read a normal history book anyway? It's much more fun to imagine. No, what we've done is we've condensed it down to the basics, and then we've given you these short stories to give you that emotional context. What was actually behind, this momentous decision? And interestingly enough, we've actually had a history teacher buy one of our books because she'd never thought of presenting history in this way. We had a long chat with her at one of the conventions, and in the end, she bought the book because she thought the way of presenting history was fascinating.
Yeah, I vaguely remember talking about that. I was about to ask about that's cool. And then before we got talking, it looks like there's even like some I don't know if you'd call them like radio shows in regards to the going back to the era of the Empowered, but on your Kickstarter page, it looks like there's some radio shows or something.
I refer to them as audio stories. But yeah, I mean, these are done by the very talented Leo Kosh. He's part of the team. He's been part of the team for a while, particularly on the convention side. But his thing is really, he's a voice actor, and a while ago he did one story. It was about 10 minutes for Era of the Consortium, Hardcastle's Havoc. If you want to look it up, it comes up on Google. But for this campaign, we decided that we were going to do something a little bit special. We all love Era of the Empowered. Who doesn't love being a superhero? We decided we were going to do something a bit special. So these 3 stories that are currently on the Kickstarter as of recording, but by the time this comes out, there'll be a 4th, because I'm releasing it on Sunday the 11th. So there are 5 total episodes, and we were releasing 1 a week. And these are stories from the actual rulebook that have been brought to life by Leo. I directed them, and all of the voice talent in them is Leo there. And yeah, as you were saying before we started recording, I noted that you were listening to the Technodar one. In my opening story, I mentioned Martian Pantsman. Technodar is really a story about that hero and how he works, and he works in a slightly non-standard way, I think it's fair to say. Technodar is actually the name of the villain that he's going to be facing within this story. And this story is actually from the Tales of the Empowered. So since we last spoke, I've actually run another Kickstarter. It was a short stories Kickstarter, so it wasn't a gaming one. So I didn't get in touch with you to talk about it. But it was a set of short stories that were based in the Era of the Empowered universe. And what I did is I had some leftover stories that weren't going to make it into the core rulebook. And I decided that they could go in this short story collection. But I also ran this Kickstarter to allow people to put their own superheroes within the universe. Because Era of the Empowered could as you said near the start, it could literally be any superhero you can imagine. And everyone has a superhero that they've invented at some point in their life. Even if it's a basic and obvious power set, there's a twist on it that every person has made. And we had some really, really interesting ideas from an alien who's able to density shift through walls and float off the ground and so on, to a power panda, who is an individual who is trying to protect the rainforests from various abuses of mankind. So we have all kinds of different stuff that came from the backers. So there are a much more diverse set of creators than just Ed sitting there and coming up with new ideas. Because if you do that for long enough, then everything starts to feel a little bit samey.
So how did that go down? I guess there were certain pledge options, and they were able to put their story in the collection.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. There was some pledge options. It was actually part of Kickstarter's Make 100 initiative. So what I decided is that there could be up to 100 stories. Now, we didn't quite get to 100. We got about 50. But I mean, it's more than enough to make a really interesting book. We got 50 submissions from the outside, and I also, had about 20 more. So it's about a 70, 75 page book. Not all of them stick to one page. Some of them are a bit longer. It's a really great book. It's already been sent out in digital format to the backers, and I'm just waiting, because it's offered with this Kickstarter, I'm just waiting for this Kickstarter to end so I can order a print run with the right number of books.
Well, there you go. So did you get a lot of crossover between the different Kickstarters? Do you get a lot of crossover in general?
Yeah, I mean, the stories in the Tales of the Empowered actually fit into the same timeline that are the main Era of the Empowered story. And if you read over the Tales of the Empowered, it'll say something like August year 1, and then it'll give you a list of events pretty similar to the Atlantis surrendering thing that I mentioned. But it might be, for example, cosmic technology lands on Earth, and the individuals that find it become either superheroes or supervillains. That then might be a lead into one of the stories that then talks about that individual.
Well, there you go. That's pretty cool. So, and you have other stuff besides these two for the superheroes, don't you? Or are these the first in the superhero world?
There is one other Era of the Empowered campaign that happened back in October 2015. I produced a rulebook primer at the time, which contained the rules. And the rules have not actually changed since that time. But it didn't contain character creation, and it did use an older style of artwork. So what we've done, and again, another member of my brilliant team, Keith, Keith has updated the artwork style. He was the artist for the rulebook primer as well. We did kind of a Silver Age sort of feel. And we've now updated it to sort of a more modern feel. We actually were inspired by the Wonder Woman run that happened last year in 2017. And we decided to take that kind of feel and and style, and bring that to Era of the Empowered instead. So we've discontinued the old rulebook primer that was funded by that previous Kickstarter. We've met the stretch goal. That means we're going to make a new rulebook primer. And we've also, of course, got the core rulebook. I mentioned previously Era Hitman, which is, it does contain superpowered assassins and superpowered targets, but it's a totally different way of handling superpowers. You're very limited in how much you can use them, and you have to sort of strategically decide when to use them. They're also sort of probably more immediately accessible, very, very powerful stuff. So it's kind of a totally different rule set and a totally different way of handling it.
Cool. Yeah, that kind of intrigues me. The whole superhero assassins. That sounds kind of cool.
Well, the superhero assassins do actually exist in this setting as well. The League of Assassins is a classic thing that you see in a lot of the superhero universes. And what we've tried to do in this game is give you those situations, but sort of tweak the reasons why. So Atlantis attacks the surface world. Happens in Marvel, happens in DC. And when it happens, you know, there are their own reasons for it in each universe. In our universe, they attack in response to a robot attacking them. They figure it was an act of war by the surface world, and they come onto the surface to fight back. You know, so in that way, you know, we're adapting these tropes because most people want to play one of the basic superhero tropes. You want to play, oh, you're the first person with powers, or you want to play as part of a team, or you want to play, you know, fighting off an invasion by Atlantis, or you want to play, you know, as superpowered policemen, where you're trying to protect the world from the supervillains, and you're kind of government sanctioned, or you want to play fighting against an alien invasion, and so on and so on and so on. So, you know, all of these eras that we have in Era of the Empowered, they give you these opportunities to experience these tropes, but also they have their own unique story that connects them one to the next to the next, that sort of have their own unique twist on why. And that's one of the things that I think as a role-playing game designer makes the game interesting.
There you go. Who do you play as, Ed, if you can choose?
At the moment, I'm actually playing a game, and I play as either Penumbra, who's one of our most famous characters. We actually have comics of Penumbra. Penumbra was my very first character in this universe. She has the ability to create solid shadows in any shape that she would like. So sort of similar to Green Lantern in a sense, in that she can make stuff, whatever she can imagine. But at the moment, I'm playing my second ever game in this universe. I'm usually we've been playtesting for nearly 3 years, and I'm usually the GM, so I don't get to play very often. But I'm playing as Violet, and if you go onto the Kickstarter and you look in the top left-hand corner, that's actually Violet. She's able to fly and she has super strength, but that's not because she's actually physically remarkable anyway. She's actually a telekinetic. But she's what I call a visceral telekinetic. So she's not capable of raising objects by moving her hand around, you know, force powers style. She can punch you and it'll be a normal punch, but then her telekinesis will turn that into a super punch, a super powerful, super strength. And that's actually her power. Her power is telekinesis.
Okay, cool. So when you're able to play the games or when you're play testing and whatnot, does any of the role playing game that you guys actually play, does any of that translate into future comic books, or how does that work?
What we usually do is, so I mentioned Penumbra, the first character that I played, and the group that I played with, we actually did a little campaign that is actually in the rulebook. So there is a story in the rulebook about a group of people, Lacuna, the Human Shield, Martian Pants Man. All of these guys were the original players, and they were dumped into sort of a bubble universe. In fact, again, I can refer to the main Kickstarter image. The lady in the middle at the top of that Kickstarter image is called the Unnamed One, or Unnamed for short. And she is capable of creating bubble universes. Unfortunately, she usually creates your worst nightmare. So she's taken possession of by an alien, who again is in the image. He's the very tall one on the right-hand side. She's taken possession of by an alien who creates this bubble universe as a training ground, right? So that new empowered can prove themselves good enough to join him. Now, he actually abducts a group of individuals and dumps them in there, and they have no choice but to fight to survive. Now, they're obviously not very happy with this, and they eventually escape, but that entire story that we explore in the rulebook is actually the very first campaign that we ever ran of Era of the Empowered.
Okay, cool. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, so you played the two characters. How does that, like, can you take us a little bit through the play testing and whatnot? Do you play test the different elements of the game, or how does that work?
So, playtesting has some various different bits. And again, you can find a lot of information about how the game runs. There's an Era of the Empowered demo session video in the actual Kickstarter, where I literally run a game for an hour just to show what it looks like. So, you obviously have to test out the rules, and thanks to producing Era the Consortium and Era Liars and Era Survival and all of the others, I have a lot of experience now with the Era D10 rule set, which all of those games run on. They're actually compatible. You can transplant rules from one game to another if you want to. I know a group that has done exactly that. And those rules, therefore, I was pretty sure were solid, but how do superpowers apply to those rules? How do you build a superpowered character was really the center of most of the playtesting. And then also, how does the universe feel and taste? Because, you have to make sure the universe feels right for people to want to play it. That was the other major part of the playtesting. So in order to sort of adapt the universe to how it should feel, I obviously played with a load of different groups. I watched. One of the really important things, if there are any aspiring game designers out there, I cannot encourage you enough. Get someone else to run a game, or if it's a board game, then play a game, while you sit back and say nothing, do nothing, take notes. Because until you do that, you don't know how someone else is going to pick up your game and play it. You literally must sit there in silence, and it is hard. It is very, very difficult. But do it, because you will learn more about your game than you ever imagined.
Cool. So have you done that more than once? I imagine you've done that more than once.
Actually, I've done that a few times, and the guys over at Dyson Stuff, www.dysonstuff.com, they're a podcasting group who do a lot of Era games. And they're fantastic for this, because they will read the book, they will talk to me a little bit about how it should work, and then they will go off and run a campaign. And they've been running a consortium campaign for ages. They've done nearly 100 sessions. But they've also run 10 sessions of Era the Empowered. They've run, I think it's 12 of Era Survival. And they go away and they'll do these sessions. And I can sit down and listen to their podcasts anytime and go, I didn't explain that well enough. They've done that totally wrong. That's not how it's supposed to be. And I can go away and make a tweak or an adaptation to the game that I'm then producing. I also have a group of individuals who run my games at conventions, and that also gives me the opportunity to sort of sit in. I often sit down at conventions when I need a rest, and I'll actually play one of my games with a group of other people who are playing for, because they're attendees at the convention. And, it gives them a kick to sit down and play with the creator. They figure they're definitely going to win then. But I'll mostly sit there relatively quiet. I'll do my own thing, and, I'll attack enemies or whatever, but I won't be contributing to the overall plan, and I'll sit and listen to them play. And again, that gives me the opportunity to do what I'm talking about, which is sit and listen and make notes and not really talk too much.
Yeah, I think that's important. Listening to, there was a creator a little bit ago. He had his game up on Kickstarter. He actually had to cancel it, but we'll be going back later on. But his name is Jack Sporner. He had let me think. What was his name of his game? It's called the Dungeons of Infinity, and he actually had the Unfiltered Gamer play it, and it sounded like they got it wrong when they played it.
Yeah, and it can be very educational to have that done. But I strongly recommend that you do it before it goes off to professional reviewers. That's definitely something that you really ought to be careful about.
Yeah, for sure. So that podcast, they can go in and listen, and they're just always doing the air all year. It's just strictly devoted to you guys' games.
They have one other campaign as well called the Humeon campaign. I think they've stopped doing that one now. For the most part, it is Era games, particularly Era the Consortium. Certainly, my sessions outnumber anything that they've done for anything else. But Era the Consortium was where they started. They actually started that site after meeting us at one of our conventions out in Canada. And we sat down, we had a really interesting conversation with them, and they went away, wanting to, create a podcast. And they went away and they created Claymore Unit. And, there was a little input from us, but that's about it. And yeah, I mean, it was really, really awesome to hear them bring their version of the universe to life. It's not 100% canon, but it's about 99% canon. And in fact, I released a definitive edition, Era of the Consortium rulebook. And I actually included a story which includes the characters from their campaign doing one of the things that they were doing within one of those sessions. So they're on board a space station and they're invaded by, you know, the army of the Consortium, and everyone's panicking, and then one of their characters stands on a table and starts giving this, you know, inspirational speech, and everyone rallies. And I actually included that as one of the stories within the definitive edition rulebook, which I was pleased to do. I'm always pleased when it's something that can be compatible. I'm always pleased to include it.
Well, there you go. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, per se, Ed, somebody's fallen asleep, and it wouldn't be because of you or your game, or because who doesn't love superheroes or superpowers, especially if you can play them. It'd probably be because of me and my podcast. They probably get tired of me droning on. It's now the 10th of March, and I believe yesterday I released my 38th episode of the year, so they get a little bit tired of me talking and whatnot. But now they're suddenly jolted awake, so they're able to catch on so they don't hit that oncoming traffic. Why should they take a chance on Era the Empowered, a superhero RPG, which ends in about a week from the time of this recording? So, less than a week by the time we release this. Why should they take a chance on that, especially with all the other great games or RPGs that are out there, especially Batman? He's kind of a superhero, and he has a Kickstarter going on too.
That's true. And I want to say first that the Batman Kickstarter does look awesome. There are a few reasons. First of all, you mentioned Batman. Batman is a board game. It's not a tabletop role-playing game. So if you're a tabletop role player, it won't scratch your itch, I'm afraid. Secondly, you can get hold of the 300-page full-color rulebook in PDF format for $15. That's about 10 UK pounds. And you can get hold of the physical version, the paperback core rulebook, for $42. That's about £28. That's 300 full color pages, which include story and history for every kind of superhero subgenre you could want to play, all in this one game. It includes all of the rules for character creation. It includes equipment. It includes 45 example power trees for all of the most common powers that I could think of that people might want, from shrinking to controlling air. It contains everything that you need to play. Thirdly, because it's a role-playing game and the price is good. Thirdly, this is our 28th Kickstarter. We are going to deliver this for 100% sure. You are not taking a chance on this. It's going to happen. We've done it 27 times before. We've had one failed Kickstarter. It was cancelled towards the end of it.
I imagine you came back and relaunched that one too, did you? Or what was that one?
I did. That was Era of the Consortium. That was my very first one. My very first Kickstarter was cancelled. I came back and relaunched it, and it's just been growing and growing ever since. But I didn't understand Kickstarter very well when I launched it for the first time.
I know I've had creators on before, and they've asked for advice from other creators. So what did you learn and revamp for that first Kickstarter to come back and relaunch, if you don't mind us asking, Ed?
The first thing that you need to learn as a first-time Kickstarter creator, and I'm talking to you all out there, make your projects, please. There are some brilliant Kickstarters out there. I love Kickstarter. I love backing Kickstarters. I've backed, I want to say, upwards of something like 80. I love backing Kickstarters. Please, please, please make your projects. But before you do, look at not just the top few projects, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the category that you're going to be building in and look at those projects. Because those projects are more like the one that you're going to be starting unless you have a massive existing audience. You can't expect better than 1 in 5 of the audience you have on, for example, a mailing list. 1 in 5 would be incredible if you managed to get 1 in 5 of the people who say they're interested in buying your game to actually back it. So don't set your sights too high. I did. I made a mistake. I should have known better. I didn't at the time. And when I came back, I set my goal much, much lower. My goal for Era the Empowered is $3,000. We're more than 200% funded at this point. That's less than the game actually costs to produce, but I would rather see the game out there and take the risk of only getting $3,000 than see myself, with a $10,000 goal, for example, and only making $6,000 and it not launching. So you have to make a decision on whether you're willing to invest your own money as well as the time that you have no doubt spent developing and creating this game.
That makes sense. I was wondering, because sometimes you see them where they're either way out there, like they got big goals, and then sometimes it seems like, wow, that goal is really lowballing it, according to just my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I mean, $3,000 for a tabletop role-playing game, which is 300 pages long, is a low goal. I will be honest. We have not yet reached, in this campaign, we have not yet reached the break-even point for me, right? That's okay. I don't mind, right? I'm going to be making more sales later. I now have 7 games. I know what I'm doing. I know how to make sales after the Kickstarter. I know what that model looks like. And if I don't break even purely off the Kickstarter, it does not bother me because I know how I'm going to approach the situation.
So if somebody's listening later on, Ed, they missed the Kickstarter because this is late in the project or whatnot, is there somewhere they can go and buy your other games, I guess it sounds like?
Yeah, you can hop onto our website, www.shadesofvengeance.com, and we have a store there where you can buy all of the games that have been released. We put them up as we release them. So it's pretty straightforward. You can get everything there right now that we have, apart from Tales of the Empowered and the Era of the Empowered old rulebook primer that I mentioned, because that's been discontinued. I don't want to sell any more of those.
Okay, but if they're listening, they for sure want to probably back this because they might get a better price if they have time before it closes up.
They will get a better price, yeah. Not only will they get a better price on the actual product, and you can see that just by looking at the reward tiers versus the prices in the store, but also you get all of the stretch goals, and we've unlocked 5. If you get physical stuff, you get free postcards with artwork. You get 1 free campaign at the moment, a 5-session campaign. You get there are going to be 20 character sheets that are made freely available, level 1 character sheets. We are only about $500 away from a second campaign, and only about $1,500 away from a third campaign. So there are a load of stretch goals there. They're all absolutely awesome, and I think that at the moment that that $42, which is already good value for money for a paperback rulebook, is made even better by a 5-session campaign and some extra physical rewards.
Cool beans. And so if somebody does go ahead and back this, I know you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but when would they get their product, at least the physical ones? I imagine the digital comes pretty quick, doesn't it?
The digital will come as soon as I finish writing it, and I'm not quite done. We've still got some of the stories to fill in. The timeline is complete, but some of the short stories I mentioned still aren't quite finished yet. They're still being written, and I've still got some work to do on the campaigns at the back of the book. There are going to be a large number of campaign sessions at the back of the book to guide you. That's in addition to the extra campaigns that are mentioned in the stretch goals. But what our commitment is, we're committing to. Oh, that's interesting. We're committing to round about October 2018. I think that's in plenty of time. My personal aim is I would like to get this done we've got 2 mid-year conventions, end of May and beginning of June. And I would like to have Era the Empowered on my table at that point. And it won't be on my table unless it has already been sent out to the Kickstarter backers. That's, I'm very, very firm on that. No one is allowed to have this before the Kickstarter backers do.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, that makes sense.
Some Kickstarters do it that way, and personally, I feel it's wrong. There is no reason why you should be giving or selling the book to other people before the Kickstarter rewards have been delivered, which allowed you to make the book. That it feels fundamentally wrong to me.
Yeah, for sure, because they're the ones that helping fund the project and whatnot.
Exactly. They deserve to get it first.
For sure, definitely. Now, and I just checking to see. I know they have the one podcast where they do the role playing games and they do campaigns of your game. Now, in regards to this, have you been on any other podcasts? I want to say coming up soon. Hopefully, just a little bit of rivalry. Hopefully, we'll beat him in releasing it or whatnot. But I want to say you'll be on We're Not Wizards with Richard. Is there any other podcasts you're going to be on though?
Actually, there aren't too many podcasts. I've unfortunately been really, really ill during this Kickstarter, and I've not been able to go on and talk to very many people. There's one other. It's called the Swarmcast podcast. It's run by a good friend of the Era Games in general, John Manis, and he is a massive fan of superheroes. The minute that he heard about Era the Empowered, he's like, Ed, come on my podcast, please. And
then you couldn't talk for a while.
Yeah, I actually had to push it back by a week because I had no voice. There's a flu going around the UK at the moment. It's pretty unpleasant, and I literally, my voice was sort of like this, and there's no way that anyone can actually hear me on a podcast if I'm talking like that. So, I had to actually push it back by a week, but that'll be out already, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so that's good. And yeah, any word on when Richard releases his, so I can try to get the upper hand?
I'm sorry, I don't know. Richard very much marches to his own tune. He's going to release it when he's ready to release it.
Yeah, last I talked to him, he said very, 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 very soon. I don't remember how many varies he had, so I'll just wait and see. You got to try to edit and get it up there before he does.
Little bit of friendly rivalry there. Although, to those people who are listening, the conversation I had with Richard is a very different one. It was much more wide-ranging. We talked a lot about the comics, because there are Era the Empowered comics. There's actually one on Kickstarter right now called Blue Shift. So we're actually running two Kickstarters at the same time for totally different things. So if you're a fan of comics, there are comics set in the Era the Empowered universe. You can actually catch up on all of the comics through the Blue Shift. It's called Blue Shift: Frenemies.
All the everything in the show notes and whatnot. But if somebody were searching for it, what would they? Okay, there we go. So just type in Blue Shift, and it looks like it comes up.
Blue Shift: Frenemies. That's right.
And it looks like it's almost done too. It's got less than a week right now, anyway, as well.
It ends. It ends on Friday. So that one ends just slightly before my one does. Blue Shift is an awesome story. It's about a speedster who still doesn't really have enough time to do everything she wants to, and is sort of new to her city, so she doesn't know, she isn't sure who to trust and who not to. It's a good story. I co-wrote it with Jonathan Lewis, who I mentioned earlier in this podcast, and it's good fun. If you like comics, I would strongly recommend it. We've got more comics coming. Again, sort of those two mid-year conventions are very much a deadline for us. We are going to have a third Empowered comic about Violet, the character that I usually play, or am playing at the moment, I should say. We're going to have a third Era the Empowered comic by then. It's going to go up on Kickstarter shortly, and the artwork has begun. Very exciting stuff. And we're going to have all of those. We've then got 3 full-length comics ready for that kind of May-June deadline.
Now, when you say full-length comics, what does that mean? Like, how big are they?
So Blue Shift, we're hoping it's going to hit the stretch goal that's going to make it 22 pages. Lacuna, which was already funded some time ago now, is 22 pages, and my hope also is that Violet will be 22 pages.
Is there a science behind that many pages, or how does that work?
Now, I'll be honest, I am nowhere near as much of an expert in the comic industry as John is. And John says that 22 pages is the standard length for a comic. You've got 22 pages of content, you've got the cover, and you've got a sort of either a back cover or an interior introduction page, depending on the way that you structure the comic.
Okay, cool. That's pretty cool. And I guess you can probably get it. Do they come in digital as well as paperback as well on those?
Digital and paperback, yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. It's cool. So I don't know. I imagine there's some kind of crossover or whatnot, but why should somebody go ahead and back the comic, would you say, Ed?
So the comics, again, if you're liking the sound of my timeline, the comics are... Do you remember when Iron Man 2 came out and there was suddenly all this promise of the Avengers movie, right? And then Thor came out. And you're like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. This is kind of cool. I'm seeing how the things are linked now, right? And then, and I can't remember, The Incredible Hulk came out. And you're like, okay, Tony Stark in the post-credits sequence. That's awesome. Things are beginning to tie together. This is what we're doing with our comics. So the first one, Lacuna. The second one is Blue Shift. The third one is going to be Violet. Actually, I tell a lie. Technically, the second one is Violet. Chronologically speaking, they're not coming out in quite the right order, just because of the way that the artwork has worked out. And unfortunately, the artist for Violet let us down a little bit, and it didn't quite work out. So that kind of thing happens, but it's not the end of the world. You can read them in any order, and they'll work because at the moment they're the standalone stories. And then there are several more comics, and as we move through these comics, you'll be getting increasingly, close to a bit of a superhero team up, which is really what John and I have planned for sort of the moderate term. Our next comic, I've actually already written it. I co-wrote it with a lovely lady from Portugal. Because it's actually based in Mexico. And I know that sounds a bit odd, but she's actually, she was born and grew up in Mexico. So she knows a lot more about there than I do. I've never been. And that's a comic about, for lack of a better phrase, a Batman-type character. Someone who has no powers. He's an engineer. And he's a bit of a martial artist as well.
Well, there you go. cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that's coming soon. And I'll tell you what, that's an exclusive for you. I've not told anyone else about that yet.
Oh, there you go. So you heard it. I can say you heard it here first on Getting Geeky with Game Relief. Take that, Richard.
Yes, you did.
There you go. Cool beans. So, a quick question for you. I've heard it happen. I've heard people explain it before, but I always forget. What's the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel, Ed, would you say?
That's an interesting question. I would actually say that the only difference really is length these days, because things that are called comics tend to be 22 pages, right? Or maybe 12 or 22 pages. Once you get into graphic novel territory, you're talking about a continuous story that lasts over 100 pages, right? The actual fundamental, and this is my opinion, and feel free, listeners, to strongly disagree with me. You may well be right, and I may well be wrong.
Well, there you go. This is the gospel according to Ed.
This is the gospel according to Ed. All right, if you like. I think that the only difference is actually length, and it's you can have a story arc across multiple comics that forms an overall story, but it's got a different feel to it because each bit, each 20 pages, you have a very sort of definitive tie-up. Even if it's a cliffhanger, you're likely to have a tie-up of some sort. And in a graphic novel, that's not necessarily the case. If you imagine a written novel, like a book, then, you might have ends of chapters, but that doesn't mean that the story stops or even that it halts. You might flow right from one chapter to the next. And it might be 2 hours later, but that could just as easily have been done mid-chapter if you wanted to. It wouldn't have mattered.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Awesome. So, yeah, like I said, we'll leave all the links in the show notes, both for the comic book, Blue Shift, Frenemies, as well as the Air the Empowered, the superhero RPG. Now, I don't know if you remember, it's been a while since we had you back on the show, Ed, but the next part of our adventures or our podcast is called The Adventures in Application Acquisition, where we talk about an app, be it for a cell phone or a tablet or a computer or even a video game. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be related to comics or RPGs or anything like that. Is there an app you use a lot of that we can talk about for a moment, Ed?
Yeah, I've recently been using a lot of Hearthstone.
Hearthstone, that's a game, isn't it?
That is a game. It's also available on PC, but personally, I always use my mobile phone. And I had a bit of a personal victory for those people out there who are familiar with Hearthstone. I finally made level 14 last month, and I could not be happier. I've never managed that before. I'm very much a casual player. I play a fair bit, but you know, I'm more of a strategist, and also random number generators hate me, which is why it's slightly ironic that I actually create tabletop role-playing games, which is just a giant random number generator to decide whether you succeed or fail at whatever it is you're trying to do. Hearthstone is, you can see that they've put some money and effort into this application. It's streamlined well. It's got an intuitive interface, and yeah, you get to sit back and enjoy playing the game, which is really the point of the application. And to me, that means it's a good application, right?
Well, that means you can sit back and play. That's good. That's awesome. So, per se, somebody like me, I've just vaguely heard it in passing. What can you tell us about the app besides you're on level 14?
I suppose in a sense it's a number matching game. It's, you've got a field, you have monsters on your side, they have monsters on their side, and each monster has an attack and a health, and you have to destroy the enemy's 30 health points. In fact, I'll tell you what, it's got some similarities to Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm pretty sure that someone is going to try and assassinate me for even saying that, but it's got some similarities to it in the sense that you have attack, you have defense, you can kill a monster, you can attack the enemy directly, but then there are some monsters that stop you from attacking the enemy directly, and each of these cards, or many of these cards, I should say, have unique abilities, and really the skill in this game comes from building your deck in a certain way. Personally, I find it really quite interesting from a strategy perspective. Even though my random number generation always sucks. I'm pretty sure if I documented it, there would actually be a correlation there. Like, whenever the enemy does random number generation, it always seems to turn out really well. Whenever I do it, it always seems to turn out terribly. But, hey. So yeah, I mean, it's about, being ready for when those bad things happen and having a backup plan. And that's always interesting, speaking strategically to me.
Well, there you go. Now, is this something that requires the internet, or is this something you can play when you're on the underground?
No, this one requires the internet. I think last time I was here, I talked about Eternium, I think, which is another game that I've played. That one does work offline. You can play it on the underground. Unfortunately, this one does require the internet and a decent connection. Otherwise, you'll disconnect a lot. And if you disconnect in the middle of a game, you lose.
There you go. Well, I remember you use the underground to write a lot of your material.
I do.
Anyway, so we don't want to give you an app that requires the internet so you can continue to write.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the advantage of Hearthstone for me, because I know I'm not going to be playing it while I'm on the underground because I can't. So I'm not tempted.
There you go. Now, if you own the rights to Hearthstone, what would be one thing you would do to make it better or fix it, Ed?
I would make it so anyone with my username would always win every game.
There you go. So yeah, if the creators are listening to this or whatnot, so if anybody, I don't know if it's a specific username or if it's just anybody with the name of Ed.
Yeah, it's Sandworm.
There you go. So if anybody uses that username, they would always win, and they'd have a better random number generator.
Yeah, instead of being 1 to 20, it's like 19 or 20, and those are the only two choices.
There you go. So there you go. So you heard it here first, what Ed would do to make that a better app. And thanks for helping him get to level 14. however that happened. That's great. Now, we don't want to keep you all day, Ed, and plus I got to get some sleep sometime or another, or my wife will kill me. But we wanted to thank you for coming on Getting Geeky with Game Relief. We really appreciate it, Ed, especially how we had to catch up with you being sick and then me having some problems going on as well. We really appreciate being able to catch up with you.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad it worked out. It's been a ball talking to you, and it's always great to come on and talk to you about the various stuff I've got going on. I have no doubt that I'll be back again before too much longer. I've got a lot going on this year. I've got another, just as a sneak peek to anyone who's actually still listening after me talking for 56 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I've got a role-playing game based on the novels by Richard Tung, Battlecruiser Alamo. He's a brilliant writer, military sci-fi. I love the stuff. I read the books for the first time, fell in love with them, and he's actually done a lot of the story writing for this actual role-playing game. So the creator of this universe, and he's written something like 30-plus novels in this universe, has actually taken the time out to go and help write up, oh, this planet's like that, and that planet's like this, and here's some stories about what it's like to be on a starship, and so on. He's actually written all of that stuff, which is absolutely brilliant. I've got a card game coming out that's called Evil Overlord, where it's a 5-minute per hand trading game where you try to take over the world. You know, you gather your army of minions and try to take over the world. I've got Era the Chosen coming soon. It's a horror game where you are one of the few people who can see what's really going on. And what's really going on is creatures from another universe are invading ours, grabbing people off the street out of invisible portals, which most people can't see. People just disappear. And you have to fight back. And then there's, you know, as I said, I've got 7 games in development right now, and that's only role-playing games. I've also got another card game. So I've got 2 card games, 7 role-playing games, 9 games in total, plus the comics that we're doing. We're doing another entry in our Bug War series, which is set in the era of the Consortium universe. We're doing the Violet comic. We're doing the Lobo comic. We have so much going on this year. It's fantastic. We're absolutely loving being able to create all this stuff. And I hope that I'll be able to come back and talk to you about some more of it. And I hope that if you're listening, you'll go and check us out. You can find us on Facebook, Shades of Vengeance. And if you're particularly interested in Era the Empowered, which is really what I was here to talk about today, there's actually an official Era the Empowered Facebook group. So if you search for official Era the Empowered, you'll find it. And on that group, I've actually been putting out daily content. So every day, it's a story, or it's an image from the book, or, you know, it's an explanation about one of the eras, like the one that I read to you at the very start of this podcast. So go check that out. There's so much stuff on there. I've been doing it for about 2 months now. There's loads and loads of stuff there. Everything you could want to know about Era the Empowered, but we're always afraid to ask.
Okay, cool. And if you get us the links, we'll go ahead and leave all that in the show notes so people don't have to type everything in. That'd be awesome. And just going back to the card game, because I'm more for card games and card games and board games. Is that a living card game or a collectible card game?
Oh, you didn't just say that. Oh no. It is a card game. Yeah, sorry.
Will it be collectible, or is it a living card game, or do you get everything that you need to play it?
You get everything that you need to play it to start with. It's a deck of... How many cards is it? I want to say it's 140 cards or so. 136, I think the number is.
Is it like a deck builder, or what kind of card game is it?
I would call it a hand builder, because, yeah, it's a deck builder, but it's condensed down to 5 minutes. You get dealt 7 cards, and then you trade between players for your cards to try and get the best hand that you can. If anyone is familiar with the game Pit... it's inspired by that. It's kind of an older game. I used to play it with my parents. And it was inspired by that. And the idea is that you are an evil mastermind, and the evil forces of the world are in disarray. You grabbed up as many as you could, but you've got a mixture, and they won't fight together. So you head on down to the evil minion market, where there are other evil masterminds, and you trade your evil minions to each other, in order to make the best army and defeat the other armies and take over the world.
Oh, wow. When should we look for that, Ed?
That's going to be around, I'm anticipating, mid to end of May. It will appear on Kickstarter. I certainly hope to come back and talk to you about it.
Well, for sure.
And yeah, it'll probably run sort of mid-May to mid-June. Actually, it'll be on during those two conventions that I mentioned. Probably ought to say what they are in case you are actually UK-based and listening to this. It's going to be MCM Comic-Con in London, which is the last weekend of May. And it's going to be UK Games Expo in Birmingham, which is the first weekend of June.
There you go. So you heard it here. So if you want to stalk Ed over there in the UK, go to those 2 conventions or whatnot.
I'll be more than happy to say hi. I'll be at both conventions, and I'll be floating around, signing books, and doing all kind of the usual stuff. I'll even run some games. So if you turn up and ask for me, you might get the creator to run some games for you.
There you go. So that'd be good. Yeah. So I want to say right now in the UK, at least, we have like 8% of our listenership is. I'm kind of hoping that's more than you, Richard from We're Not Wizards, and Mark McKinnon of Wreck and Ruin fame, who currently has a game on Kickstarter as well. I'm hoping it's more than just you 3.
I'm sure it is.
I imagine it is because a while back ago, it was back at the first part of. It was back last year sometime, probably early part of last year when I first started or whatnot. I was a little bit above the Dice Tower. It was like number 9 on the UK charts for a little bit there.
Oh, not bad. Well done.
Yeah, so that was wonderful. But yeah, I'll take my minute of fame or whatnot. But yeah, I don't want to keep, like I said, I don't want to keep you all day, and I better get to bed before my wife kills me. But we wanted to thank you for coming on, Getting Geeky with Game Relief. We really appreciate it, Ed.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
It's time for Kickstarter Corner. To begin now.
You heard her right. It's time for Kickstarter Corner. So here goes nothing, shall we? First off, we've got Liminal RPG. Liminal is a self-contained tabletop role-playing game about people caught in between the everyday modern world and the world of magic. This one sounds really fun, and they were going for about 4,000, and they're almost at 18,000 at the time of this recording. And they're going through the 29th of March. Definitely check that one out. It's by Paul, and it's really cool. Then we've also got Swordcrafters. Craft 2D card game. Yes, we got Swordcrafters. Craft 2D game pieces into a 3D sword. This is a tile selection and placement board game where each player builds a 3D tableau in the shape of a sword. No people were killed in the creating of the sword. Or no fingers were sliced, I guess. Whatever you want to say. So check that one out by Adam over there at Adam Apple Games. Then we've also got Palm Island. It's a portable card game. Take your island with you. Play anywhere with this portable deck transformer game. They've got 3,000 backers. At the time of this recording, they had 4 days to go. They're going through the 14th of March. Check it out on the Kickstarters. It looks pretty fun. And then they've also got Animal Elements, the wild miming game. It's a gorilla with brain freeze, a hyena with a hangover. Act out ridiculous combinations in this hilarious family-friendly party game. And they're almost funded. They've got, they're about $700 or so, a little bit less than that from their goal. Got about 4 days to go as well, so they end the 14th of March. Definitely check that one out on the Kickstarters. And then, last but not least, we've got Swords and Souls. Earn your escape from the underworld by fighting your former friends. In this fast-paced combat card game, get ready to get aggressive. They've got about 12 days to go. They're about a fourth of the way to their goal. Going through the 22nd of March. Check that one out on the Kickstarters. And you know what? It's time for you to get on with your lives. Well, you to get on with our lives and our to get on with your lives. Hey, that doesn't make any sense. Well, anyways, get on with your lives. I'll get on with my life. And we'll catch each other on the flip side. But in the meantime, get geeky, stay geeky, and bring others into Geekfold. And we will catch you all on the flip side. Game Relief, out.
Gamer Leaf levels up. Tune in next week to see if Gamer Leaf's luck holds up.